Good morning, viewers. I'm Dr. Sundarambal, Principal Scientist, Agricultural Extension from ICAR-IISWC RCOT. Now I am presenting on PRA techniques in watershed planning. What is the necessity to follow participatory approach in watershed planning? When we follow the participatory approach, which is contrary to the top-down approach, all the benefits will go to the right type of target group. That is, we can identify the right type of beneficiaries for right type of interventions. And in participatory approach, there is a shift from centralized standardization to local location specificity. PRA enables the local people to share, enhance, and analyze the local conditions and to plan and act for watershed development. What is PRA? It is a systematic yet semi-structured activity carried out in the field by a multidisciplinary team of specialists. This is done to acquire quickly new information on and new hypotheses for watershed development. PRA can help the communities to mobilize their human and natural resources. It enables the multidisciplinary team of specialists and the rural leaders to work more closely in the watershed. It integrates the traditional skills of local people and the external technical knowledge of the project staff. When many conventional tools are there to collect the information needed for watershed planning, why we need to opt for PRA? This PRA is based on extensive cross-checking mechanism or triangulation principle, because of which we will be able to get accurate and timely information required for watershed planning. Here people themselves are the solution agents, as we are asking them to quote the major problems and the possible solutions for the problems. It cuts down the normal professional biases which is generally observed in conventional extension tools. It is less time consuming because we can choose the appropriate PRA tool depending on the requirement for watershed planning. Coming to the various PRA tools that could be used for watershed planning, one is timeline, followed by social mapping or resource mapping, seasonality diagramming, transect walk, matrix ranking and scoring, resource inflow and outflow diagramming, well-being ranking or wealth ranking, indigenous technical knowledge, and problem tree analysis. There are many other techniques also, but these techniques are more relevant for watershed planning. Now I shall explain one after another. The first one is timeline. Here we have to ask the elderly people of the watershed to quote the major events that took place in their watershed with time period. Through this exercise, we can know the calendar of historical events and through which we can trace the trends through history. The purpose of doing this timeline exercise is to find out the sequence of historical events and changes that are taking place in the watershed. Under what situation this exercise is done is to find out the background of the village, whether that particular village is underdeveloped or developed, and we can plan accordingly. And it also helps to know the evolution of specific activities or programs in the watershed areas. This is a hand-drawn example of timeline exercise for the watershed, wherein we can do this exercise for various purposes like transport and communication, agriculture, animal husbandry, livestock, natural resources, etc. And this exercise is specifically useful in watershed planning with regard to entry point activities, which helps in developing good rapport between the project staff and the watershed community. Coming to the social mapping or resource mapping, these maps are drawn by the watershed people with rangoli powder or chalk either in the ground or on the paper. This is done to understand the village layout and the main features of the watershed. The purpose of doing this exercise is to know the social and physical layout, that is what facilities are there and where they are located, to know the social structure of the village, that is to know the which people where they are living, and to know the various natural resource environment of the watershed. Under what situation we are following this exercise is to know the status of land holding and animals in the watershed, to know the beneficiaries of development programs, to locate the dry land, irrigated land, forest land, rivers, temple lands, tanks and nalas, and other water resources. And finally, we have to use the various information collected through this tool for preparing the watershed treatment plans. This is again another hand-drawn example for social and resource mapping of Salur watershed from Coimbatore district of Tamil Nadu. Here the watershed farmers, they have used certain symbols to depict the various items like location of agricultural lands, habitations, various common community facilities, and even some of the existing structures and proposed structures like check dams. The next exercise is seasonality diagramming. It is very important tool in watershed planning. Through this tool, we are able to identify the reasonable variations in any activity and the seasonal factors affecting any issues. The purpose of doing this exercise is to plan agricultural interventions based on the seasonality factors and to plan for employment generation activities, especially during the lean period for the landless people through SHG activities. Here again, this is another hand-drawn exercise for the Salur watershed. Here, the Tamil months and corresponding English months are given, and the various events that are taking place during various months are depicted here. For example, during which month and which season the sowing of crops, house repair, festival, harvesting of the produce, sale of the produce are taking place. And this exercise is very much useful to plan, even to conduct the time of PRA, and we can take up the agroforestry plantation works during the rainy season, and we can take up the construction works during the off season. The other exercise is Transact Walk. It is an exploratory walk made by the multidisciplinary team of specialists along with the watershed villagers to observe and send in the minute details. The purpose of doing this exercise is to know the farming practices, cropping pattern, physical layout of the village, and to know the agro-ecosystem and cross-sectional view of the village or watershed. Under what situation we are doing this exercise is, it is a prerequisite for mapping, zoning of different areas, productivity zoning, locating ITKs, and finally the areas which needs to be treated or developed. Here, this is another hand-drawn example of Transact Walk which is done for Salur watershed. Here 5 Transact walks have been made, and in each Transact the various observations like soil type, slope, water holding capacity, vegetation, land use, etc. are observed, and based on these observations we have to identify the problems existing in each Transact and the potential opportunities to develop each Transact are to be done. See, for example, if we make a gully Transact, we can decide the place where the check dam can be constructed. The next exercise is matrix ranking or preference ranking. This is mainly done to know the farmer's preference for certain items over the other items. Based on the preference ranking, we need to introduce the interventions in the watersheds. Here is another example for preference ranking of the watershed farmers of Salur watershed for cereal crops. Here in the matrix, in the rows, the major cereal crops grown in that watershed are given, and in the columns, the criteria given by the farmers to prefer those crops are given, and the farmers were asked to give the scores for each crop against each criteria. Finally, by adding the scores, the ranks are given. Based on the rank, we can know which crop is preferred first by the farmers, and accordingly we can plan for increasing the production and productivity through demonstration on improved package of practices. Coming to the next exercise, resource inflow and outflow. This is done mainly to understand the village economy and planning for the development interventions in the watershed villages. The main purpose of doing this exercise is to know the inflow and outflow of various resources pertaining to a village, a family, a business, etc. And again, the resources include human and material resources and other natural resources. When we do this exercise, we have to select a representative farm household. We have to ask them what enterprises they are practicing, for example, agriculture and animal husbandry, and we have to ask them to depict how much yield they are getting from each enterprises, how much they are reserving for their own household consumption, how much they are selling in the market, and what is the surplus. Based on the surplus available in each enterprise, we can plan for some of the interventions. For example, if milk production surplus is there, we can plan for dairy-based industries through some SHG groups. And in the same way, if paddy straw or wheat straw is excess after meeting out the fodder requirement of their animals, we can suggest for going for mushroom cultivation. And for the cereal products, for the surplus, we can plan for cereal based products like biscuits, bakeries, etc. through FPOs and organizations like SHGs. Coming to the well-being ranking or wealth ranking, this is mainly done in the watershed to know the socio-economic dimensions of the watershed people. The purpose of doing this exercise is to ascertain the relative economic status. Here is another example of well-being ranking, wherein the key informants of the watershed were asked to categorize the entire watershed household into different categories. For example, here the key informants have categorized the watershed villages into 4 categories, namely lowest rate of poverty, agricultural laborer, poorest of the poor, and relatively better. The criteria are given in the right hand side, and the households which are fulfilling this criteria are put forth in the respective category which is given in the left hand side. This exercise will be very much helpful to identify the right type of people for right type of interventions. The next exercise is indigenous technical knowledge. These are all the technologies evolved by the watershed people and convened to the next generation. Here we have to integrate the science and technology from the research institutions, technical and managerial know-how of the project staff, and accumulated experience of the village people in solving a particular problem in the watershed. The next exercise is problem tree analysis. Here we have to do this exercise to identify the major problem faced by the watershed people. Because of the time limitation and unit cost limitation, we cannot address all the problems during the project period. Here we can gather the people who are interested in solving the problem, and we can ask them to draw the problem in the form of the trunk of the tree, and the reasons in the form of roots, and the effects or consequences in the form of branches, and potential solutions as fruits. In the right hand side, it is an example of problem tree analysis drawn for Salur watershed. Here the farmers of that watershed, they have perceived that water scarcity is a major problem, and here they have depicted the reasons for water scarcity like less trees, less rain, etc. in the form of roots, and the main consequences or effects of water scarcity problem like less water available to crop production, livestock, drinking, etc. in the form of branches, and the possible solutions they have depicted in the form of routes like construction of check dams, percolation ponds, use of micro irrigation, etc. Coming to the advantages or strength of PRA, when we involve the various categories of people while doing the PRA exercises, it raises the feeling of ownership of project on the part of the local people. Since it is based on triangulation and cross-checking, we could get more reliable data, and this is user-friendly technique, and it is effective for micro-planning in watershed. It helps the people in empowering and making the decisions in the watersheds. We cannot always say that PRA is a universal panacea for all the problems. It has got its own limitations and weaknesses, and it doesn't aim at collecting quantified information always. Mainly qualitative information we are getting, because of which we lack objectivity and requires very good skill on the part of the persons who are doing this PRA exercise, and people's expectations are becoming too high, especially when we do the tools like preference ranking of the farmers, and the findings cannot always be generalized. Outcome is always not fruitful, and PRA exercises are very much restricted to micro level planning, and has got less relevance in monitoring and evaluation. However, if we follow the following tips, we can do the good PRA exercise and we can develop a good watershed plan. We have to carry out the required materials like chalks, seeds, charts, sketches, etc. in a well-planned manner, and we have to conduct the PRA at convenient time. For example, we should not do it during peak harvesting season or peak transplanting season or festival season. We have to choose appropriate place where we can accommodate more number of people and which is more accessible to all people. As far as possible, we have to make stay and food arrangements in the watershed itself, otherwise we may be wasting our time in transport. And we should encourage as many people in the village to participate in the PR exercises, like we may include women farmers, village youths, and progressive farmers, so that we can get representative data and we can develop representative plan for the watershed, and we can achieve the desired results through implementation of watershed programs. Thank you for your patient listening. For further reference, the reference is given here, and you may also contact me through this email psundarambal@gmail.com. Once again, thank you very much for your patient listening.